Meet Dr. Gbenga Alalade, who will be speaking on accelerating innovation in architecture, engineering, and construction. Gbenga holds a PhD in architecture with a special interest in architectural structures. His interest in architectural structures sparked his flair for long-span and large-scale buildings. He is the project director and lead architect of the 100,000-seat stadium-like sanctuary, the Arc Legacy Project, which would be the largest covered stadium structure in the world upon completion. Gbenga focuses on connecting people by creating smart and sustainable buildings and cities. He has led the design and construction of several large-scale and infrastructural projects across Nigeria and a few African countries, ranging from stadiums, megachurches, shopping malls, airports, high-rise buildings, educational facilities, housing estates, road construction, wastewater treatment plants, and power plants, among others.
Thank you. Thank you very much, uh, the job design team, for that brief bio. And I think right away I'll be going into my very short session. Mine is a very short session. My job is very simple. It's just to introduce this conference, and I'm sure we can take it up from there with uh, you know, our panel of speakers. Like I mentioned, we have a large plethora of speakers from different disciplines. And so I'll just take my session and welcome you. So thank you very much. And as I progress, so just trying to share briefly on accelerating innovation in architecture, engineering, and construction. It's interesting that a profession like ours that prides itself as a hub of creativity, there's a blind spot, a very interesting one at that. And this blind spot is that professionals who are trained in creativity, architects, engineers, planners, we belong to one of the least innovative sectors in the global economy. That's a paradox. And that's why I've titled my paper, The Creativity Paradox. We're the guys, we're the folks who are seen as creative, trained in the art of creativity. And yet, we belong to the least innovative sector in the global economy. Now, this paradox is not normal, it's not philosophical, it's not it's structural, it's economical, and it's cultural at the same time. And the point is, if we don't address this challenge, this blind spot, we may soon be like the dinosaur, who, in their large scale, in their each size, after a while, they just moved into extinction. That may begin to happen to the design enterprise, the construction enterprise, if we do not reinvent ourselves, if we do not address this blind spot. And so that's a major blind spot at the crux of my discussion, this afternoon. And of course, as I progress to my next slide, I'll be looking at new dimensions within this same concept. Now, it will interest you that in a 2017 landmark study by McKinsey and Company, they realized from their study that even though our profession, our industry contributes 13% of global GDP, we have only achieved 1% productivity in the past 2 decades. Now, if you compare this to the global economy, 2.8%, increase or growth, compared to manufacturing, you have 3.6% in manufacturing. If you compare it to the high-tech sectors, you have 4.1%. And yet, the industry that contributes 13% to global GDP, the industry that is that is based on creativity, only has 1% productivity. That's a paradox. That's the paradox. And it's a major gap. Now, this gap becomes more interesting and perplexing when you realize that architects are trained to think divergently, to imagine the unseen. I mean, engineers design complex structures, large span, long span, solve complex problems. Builders can put together different materials. They can, harness human resources, and yet we are unable to break through productivity in our industry. And so, uh, and yet we also live in an industry where we can literally have 1.6 trillion dollars in addition if we are able to just become more productive and more innovative. And so, the issue around creativity, our creativity as professionals has not been translated into systemic innovation. It's just been redundant within the silo of our profession. And so this gap needs to be addressed. And like I said, this is the focus of my presentation today. And so going further to to explore this this gap, I mean, as you can see on this graph, the hourly rate for construction $25, 1% productivity growth, for the global economy about 2.7, 2.8%, and that's about $37 per hour in terms of wages. Now, and for the manufacturing sector, it's about $39, about 3.6 percent growth, right? And for tech, about 4.1%. Now, that's an irony. That's an irony. It's a paradox. We are the guys who are most creative, and yet when it comes to translating that creativity to innovation, it becomes a problem. And so we explore further on my first slide. And so the question is, why does this gap exist? Why? Well, a number of reasons, but I'll just try to zoom in on three here. One is the industry is fragmented. We have the project owners, consultants, contractors, suppliers, subcontractors, especially subcontractors. Now, and each of these groups of persons, professionals, we are working in most times working in silos with misaligned incentives. And so this becomes a major reason why innovation does not exist within our industry. And that's because a lot of fragmentation. Of course, you also have risk aversion. Okay? Now, please, back to the last slide. Risk aversion. We are always keen on, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I mean, with this, we are keen on reliability. Oh, it must be stable, it must be structured, and of course, cost control. We are unable to experiment. You find folks in the tech industry, in manufacturing, coming up with new products, new ways of doing things. But most times for us, we are stuck with, oh, the code. The code says so. It got to be so. Of course, procurement and contract, a very interesting part. The lowest bid wins the contract. And this oftentimes discourages innovation. You may have a bidder with a more creative, a more innovative approach, but because lowest bid wins. And so these are fundamental reasons, among others, why innovation deficit exists in our industry. Now, creativity is not the problem. We are creative. I mean, all through your training in the uni, creativity is at the core of the training of designers. But the issue is more about the systems. Okay? Now, we are creative in form, but usually we are conservative in process. If you observe literally every project, the same routine of design, the same routine of specification, the same routine. So in most times, yes, new challenges, but we are approaching those challenges with the same processes. And so this in itself is a killer of innovation. And so really the problem is not about the absence of creativity, rather is the absence of mechanisms to convert creativity into innovation, which has been at the core of what we do. And so I would like to just look at about three case studies that highlights a something of innovation gap. And I'll just take very simple, I mean, I'll call them it's very simple gadgets. If you do a comparison between the television set and a water closet, Water closet was developed. The flushing system was developed about 300 years ago and more. Now, if you compare that and the growth of the WC, its evolution, if you compare it to the television set, the TVs were first developed in 1927, about 100 years ago. But in the last 100 years, I'm sure we have seen how TVs have moved, how they've evolved over the years. Okay, you have widespread color adoption, you have LCD, you have plasma. Now, much more than that is the value creation of the equipment or the outside item called the TV. Today is worth over $250 billion and has created new ecosystems like streaming, digital advertising, content creation. Whereas the toilet has literally remained stagnant, has literally remained but just functional. You just see different manufacturers coming in with different curves, different shapes, designs of the toilet, and yet the toilet has not evolved. Okay, so TV has become a smart, adaptive, technology. The toilet has remained in its functional state. Okay, Bill Gates once remarked about it. He said, "Look, everything we have made progress in everything except toilets." That's an expert in technology who has devoted his life to the health sector. Say, hey, it appears we have made progress every other place, but in toilet, this box or this cylinder, this equipment still remains the same way, the same flush system. Okay, you can imagine the X trap was patented in 1775. Since that time, it's literally been the same. Nothing really significant in terms of its function and change. Okay, my next slide. Thank you. Now, another product is the smartphone and the brick. Just some random comparison that gives us a sense. And these things have been about 50 years, 100 years. Okay, smartphone. We had the typical analog phone. Smartphone came up in about 2000 and 2000 year about. Within that, within the last 25 years, the smartphone has evolved dramatically, astronomically. But our brick has literally stayed the same in the last 2000 years. And so we can see the way smartphones have transformed from luxury to life essential tools. People can't just do without their phones. But the building blocks for cities have barely changed. And we are still using, the elements we used, you know, about 2 million years ago to still build mega cities in the 20th, century. And so I'm sure now we can see there's a gap if we compare these elements. The third case study is about uh, automobiles and building assembly. If you compare the way the vehicle has evolved, okay, from the 14 model by Henry Ford and building assembly, okay, the 14 model has evolved in the last 100 years. We can see that even today we now have cars that 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 work are driven by operating systems. You have EVs everywhere. You have autonomous vehicles everywhere. Now, R&D alone in the automobile sector is about 2 to 6% of annual revenue. Now, the same is not with construction. The building system has remained literally the same way over the decades, the same way. Okay, so these are areas. This is just to give us just a sense of how other industries have evolved. I've shared about the TV, that's media. Okay, I've shared about the phone. I've shared about WC, and so it gives us a sense of how other industries have evolved. But construction, design, we are literally just moving and not progressing much. All right, next slide, please. And so, just to also give you a sense of, oh, yes, are we actually having some bits of innovation in design? Oh, yes, we are. I mean, example, a global view will give us we have modular construction in Sweden and Singapore. Of course, this has led to about 40% of new homes use modular methods. In Singapore, the prefab homes, pre-finished volumetric, construction. This has given rise to about 30%, in time saving. In the US, you have AI powered design in the US. Okay, digital twins in the UK. Obviously, there are some signs of innovation. I mean, we have some firms, some organizations that are taking the lead, but there can be more in terms of the gap between construction and design and other industries. Quickly, next slide, please. Yes, the next slide. Now, for Africa, we stand at the threshold. By 2050, in 25 years' time, Africa will need about 7 million new housing units. Nigeria alone has about 20, 30 million housing units deficit. Now, and yet, with this kind of shortfall, challenges, only 20% thereabout of companies in AEC in Africa, in Nigeria, are using digital tools. And so we can see that dichotomy, that contrast. And so it's not about a technology problem, it's more of a leadership challenge. And this calls for professionals to be system thinkers. I think we need to think beyond our profession and think a system and think problem and think solving problems. Not just think of I'm an architect, I will just design buildings. No. We should think how can we solve problems at scale. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so, how can we break this paradox? Five quick things. Now, we need to begin to think from projects to products. Now, we have been designing buildings over the years. It's time we think of buildings like products, where we can have repeatable, upgradable modular systems. And of course, we can take a cue from the tech firms. You will see iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, and like that. And you can see that, oh, one same iPhone, you have iPhone Pro, iPhone Max. Now, we need to think of buildings in that regard. From analog craft to digital mastery. Oh yes, we have tools today, tools such as 3D printing, robotics in construction. Now this needs to become the norm. Now, this shouldn't just be case studies in Europe or a part of the world. It should be the norm if we want to really be innovative in our industry. And of course, we must not see technology as a field, as a domain. Rather, we should see technology as a medium for communication in business. Okay? We must go from the star architect syndrome, okay, or star designer to fostering collaboration. That's where the genius of our work is. The star architect will someday, you know, go extinct. Star designer will someday go extinct. But if you have built a team, this team can always scale innovation. They can scale solutions. Right. And of course, we must go from the lowest cost to the longest value. The idea of, oh, the lowest bidder wins the project may not always be the solution. Rather, to look at which solution will give the client the longest value, optimum value. Quickly, I have a few more slides before I tidy up my. And so, just a very simple case study. Of course, the ARC project, for instance, also have had its own challenges. But we had to reimagine collaboration. I recall at the time, our design office, we were working both remotely, okay, also working in a physical location, right? We had to co-work because no one single architect, two architects can get the job done. So you have to work on the same project on several systems. You have to have a workflow using Beam. Of course, an amazing part is that we also had challenges with procurement, and we had to break the norm. Okay, we had to reinvent relating not just with installers, relate directly with manufacturers. Now, these approaches help the client to record huge cost savings. Of course, we also have to fight the forex matters. Those were critical issues. Of course, in all of these, we had to reinvent our approaches. Oh, at a point, institute, construction. At another point, precast. All of these things put together. At a point, we had to even, optimize using steel structures. And with this, we're able to gain certain amount of speed on the project. And so that's just somewhat some kind of case study. I think I should just mention as we progress. Of course, as you can see, the structure is emerging. And so as I begin to wrap up my conversation this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, for some of us it's this morning. Uh, I think government needs to mandate BIM. Now that may sound utopia in nature. Now that's one way to start. Government needs to mandate BIM, even at the point of bidding approvals. Imagine if all approved approval drawings are BIM enabled, architectural drawings, structural services, all on one platform. You can imagine how much time that will save. Of course, educators, we need to bridge the gap between creativity and technology. How do we design and how do we intend to construct? That gap needs to bridge, to be bridged. And educators can do wonders in that area, particularly when it comes to BIM adoption. Of course, professionals, we should demand better tools, share better methods, and of course, design differently. And of course, to clients and developers, well, interestingly, you need to stop asking just for beauty and cost. You must ask for performance, resilience, and adaptability. It's not about one cap fits all. No, let your designers, let your consultant produce for you high performance building. Demand for it, not just aesthetics, not just cosmetics. By the way, well, I want to say thank you very much. It's a very short presentation. I just felt I should give a background to this conference. I'm sure we have picked a couple of two things, and I'm sure that this for us to be an era of creativity, an era of innovation. I want to thank you for joining, and our speakers are set. I want to thank you. I'm sure in the next couple of minutes they will take the stage and run with the conference. Thank you very much, everyone. Once again, you're welcome.